Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Tier 2 Talk, the Australia Championship. My name is Kim McKenna, and welcome back for another week, another episode. We're hopefully trying to get back into a full-time schedule, uploading once a week. We're still in the process of that, trying to fine-tune how we're going to do it leading into the Oz Championship come October, but we are back here 2 weeks into August, and this is, a very informative podcast. Episode this one. We have no special guests this week. We tried to get some people on, however, just nothing kind of aligned up. So this one is kind of like playing catch up, but there is plenty of news to go through. So we will still have a very in-depth and, analyst kind of podcast episode talking about everything that's happening regarding Oz Championship, Oz Cup, and other news in the world of NPL football. So I hope you all have been well. Hope you have been staying healthy and all that. Like I said, next week hopefully have some special guests on the podcast. If you do have any recommendations for who you'd like to see on the podcast, feel free to reach out on Instagram or the Twitters. We are fastly growing on Instagram, especially with the upcoming Australian Championship season. You're seeing a lot more posts from us, a lot more informative posts about, who's qualifying, when they can qualify, all this sorts of stuff. So we're happy to make that sort of content for you guys, and you guys have been reciprocating it well. So happy to do that. And then also we'll start backing it up with weekly podcast episodes that kind of just help put our information that you see on the Instagram into a much longer format. And if you want a bit more of a deep dive into the world of NPL and Australia Championship football. So in saying that, we'll go through the lineup of what we have in store today. First, we're going to talk about the 3 clubs that have qualified for the Australia Championship thus far. We're going to then lead into how 6 teams could possibly qualify for the Australia Championship this weekend. What needs to happen, what needs to go right for them, what can't go wrong for them, for other clubs chasing. We'll go into all that. The Australia Cup is lighting up the Australian footballing world at the moment, and we have some fantastic results from NPL and Australia Championship clubs. We have upcoming fixtures as well to talk about, and my thoughts on that. And in breaking news, over the last 24 to 48 hours, South Melbourne has displayed their intentions for the A-League. So we'll unpack that, what that means, why they're doing it now, and my thoughts on all that. And then finally, we'll just do a general wrap-up of what the Oz Championship Foundation clubs are doing, especially with only 3 rounds left in the NPL competitions in New South Wales and Victoria. And majority of the sides are looking good to be playing finals football, and what that means going into this year's Australia Championship, which kicks off on the 16th of October. So we're just, in August now? We are 2 months shy of the Australia Championship. Still no news from Football Australia or the Australia Championship, themselves about this season, the group stages, all that sort of stuff. I would have thought there'd been something by now. Still no news. Hopefully they take advantage of the NPL surge in the Australia Cup to kind of start promoting this. But in the meantime, I will keep doing my bit and displaying news and when teams are qualifying and how they're doing it. So if you want to stay up to date with that, make sure you're following on the Instagram. That has been our main platform as recently, and especially with all the Australia Cup fixtures going on as well. We've been at the grounds more and reporting live from the grounds as well. So in saying that, we will get into our first piece of news, and we have 3 clubs that have secured their spot for the 2026 Australia Championship season. 2 returners, 1 brand new club, though a club that has a long history and legacy in the Australian footballing world. So the first 2 clubs to rejoin the Australia Championship for 2026, they made the Australia Championship last year in 2025, and that is from NPL Northern New South Wales Broadmeadow Magic and NPL Tasmania South Hobart. Both those clubs will be taking part in their second Australia Championship. Broadmeadow famously just missed out on the knockout stages last year, falling at the final hurdle. Meanwhile, South Hobart didn't have the best start to their Australia Championship. They had managerial changes within the 6 weeks of the Australia Championship, but now with a full season under their new head coach and leading into the Australia Championship, I'm sure South Hobart will be better prepared and better equipped to take on the national stage again. The brand new team that will be joining the Australia Championship for the first time from NPL Queensland, it's Lions FC, and they've been on a fantastic run. They've defeated Moreton City, who have dropped down to third this year. Currently, with one game to spare, Lions are 11 points clear of Moreton City. So Moreton City Excelsior, who made the semi-finals last year, they won't be in it this year. Lions did have to go all the way with Peninsula Power. Peninsula Power, their biggest competitors, right to the very last. However, a win last weekend secured Lions' spot in the Australia Championship, and they will be a fantastic addition to the competition. They were involved in the old NSL competition, National Soccer League, for, I think, well over a decade. Their main achievement came in 1981 when they won the NSL Cup, which is like the League Cup version, so not the Australia Cup, but a secondary cup competition. That was their biggest achievement. Whilst on the national stage there, they've still maintained their pedigree and their stature within the NPL Queensland and Queensland football, and now they'll be able to shine with a new generation of Lions back on the national stage. And I'm sure there are plenty of clubs around Australia that will be wanting to take a good shot on them, especially what they have been able to do in the Australia Cup thus far, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit of time. So, already fantastic to see teams qualifying for the Australia Championship. It's starting to come together once again for 2026. I like the fact that we have some returners, especially with the Broadmeadow South Hobart. Broadmeadow, they've won their third consecutive NPL Northern New South Wales title. They didn't have the best start to the year. They started off very slowly. However, since I believe it was May or June, the start of winter there, they kind of turned it gear and just ran away with that competition there. They won the premiership with 3 games to spare. So it's good to see them return on this national stage. South Hobart, one of the oldest clubs in Australia, largest club down in Tasmania, done it once again under a new league format. NPL Tasmania changed to just a direct home and away season. So 18 games only, play everyone home and away, and they were able to win that again for back-to-back years. Didn't do so well in terms of State Cup and stuff like that. However, they've won the premiership. They'll go into that final series full of confidence, and then they'll turn their attention to the Australia Championship once again. So we have 3 teams qualified. We need to find out how the 5 other spots are going to be filled, and they could all be filled this coming weekend, with 6 teams possibly aiming to qualify. Now, how do you fix 6 teams into 5 spots? Well, let me explain to you. So, if you've seen on the Instagram already, you know what clubs I'm about to mention, but Bayswater City, West Torrens Burkalla, Adelaide City, Canberra Croatia, Oakley Cannons, and the Sutherland Sharks could all qualify for the Australia Championship this weekend, and we're going to break down how and what needs to happen for each club to qualify. So, starting off in NPL Victoria, Oakley Cannons are currently sitting top of that league ahead of Hume City in second. Now, there is just 3 games remaining in the NPL Victoria. Oakley Cannons are currently 5 points clear of their biggest challengers, Hume City. So, realistically, for Oakley Cannons, if they are to win and Hume City are to drop points, then they have won the premiership and they will be into the Australia Championship. Oakley is hosting Green Gully this weekend, whilst Hume City have to go away to Heidelberg. Heidelberg are in action in the Australia Cup tonight, so that could be a favour for Hume City, with Heidelberg differing their footballing demands and the demands of their fixtures. Though that is the simple question. If Hume City do pick up all 3 points against Heidelberg, regardless of what Oakley Cannons does, they will have to wait till the following week, and where Oakley will play Dandenong Thunder and Hume City will play Caroline Spring George Cross. And that's where, Hume will have to start hoping that Oakley start dropping some points. But at the moment, Oakley Cannons are in firm control of their destiny. They have essentially one hand on the NPL Victoria Premiership, and with that, a spot in the Oz Championship is theirs for the taking. Moving on to NPL South Australia, and this is arguably the tightest, and one that will definitely be decided this coming weekend, with the final day of the season coming up in NPL South Australia. Final day action is, I believe, Saturday. Yep, this Saturday, 7:30. Every game in that league is taking place at the same time and is a two-horse race between Adelaide City and West Torrens Burkalla. And this is where the 6 teams can qualify for the 5 spots. Both these sides can qualify for the Australia Championship this weekend, though certain things need to happen. Now, we will have a new representative from South Australia, Metro Stars, who competed in the tournament last year, made the knockout stages. They are currently 3rd, still only 4 points behind Adelaide City in 1st. However, with just the 1 game left, Metro Stars will not be competing in the Australia Championship this year. So, what do Adelaide City and West Torrens need to happen for them to qualify? Now, currently 1 game remaining. It is Adelaide City on 45 points, West Torrens Burkalla on 44 points. So it is a very close race for the premiership in South Australia. West Torrens do have the better goal difference by 2 goals on Adelaide City. However, that won't really come into play it could come into play if West Torrens do draw and Adelaide City lose. So lots of scenarios to play, and let me get up my spreadsheet and we will talk about them. So Adelaide City, they are away to FK Beograd. I apologize if I spelt or mispronounced that one wrong. And so Beograd, they're currently 4th in the league, so it's not going to be an easy challenge for Adelaide City. They will have to work for it. Meanwhile, West Torrens, they'll be playing the Adelaide United under-21 side, the NPL version of Adelaide United in the A-League. Adelaide United are currently 7th in the NPL South Australia, which is 1 point off 6th, which is a finals position. So they will also be fighting for it. So both Adelaide City and West Torrens are playing sides with, stuff on the line. Now, Beograd is secured in the finals. However, if they want to finish 4th, they will have to pick up some points because Playford City are right behind them on 1 point. So, both have tough opponents. 1 game remaining, 1 point separating the 2 sides. If Adelaide City win by any means, by any goal difference, they will be through to the Australia Championship and win the NPL South Australia title. If Adelaide City draws or loses and West Torrens wins, then West Torrens will win the premiership and go through to the Australia Championship. If both sides draw, the table will stay the same and Adelaide City will advance. If Adelaide City lose and West Torrens draw, then they will end on 45 points and Adelaide City will drop down 2 seconds because West Torrens will have a better goal difference than City. And it will be West Torrens premiership for the taking. So, it's a fantastic final day if you're an NPL South Australia fan. 7:30 Saturday night, so stay tuned to that. Stay tuned to our Instagram. We will post as soon as full time happens what happens in that league. But it's going to be a fantastic final day. It's the best defense of Adelaide City, only conceding 16 goals, versus the best attack in the league in West Torrens, who have scored 53 goals in 21 games. So it's going to be a fantastic final push. Both sides have been in this battle, in this premiership battle, all the way. Adelaide City have undefeated in their last 5. West Torrens have slipped over the last few weeks. They're 3 wins out of their last 5. So it is Adelaide's for the taking at the moment. However, they will need to ensure that they finish the job off on the final day. The next league we're going to talk about is NPL West Australia. Still 3 teams vying for the premiership in this one, though after this weekend, it could narrow the gap depending on how teams do and perform. So Bayswater City, they played a catch-up game last weekend, and they won that one, so they moved to the top of the NPL Western Australia League. They're on 41 points. Olympic Kingsway, they're on 40 points, and Perth Red Star are on 38 points. So the top 3 in NPL West Australia are separated by just 3 points, and there is a lot to play for in the final 2 weeks of NPL West Australia. So, Bayswater City in pole position. They can qualify this weekend. They are playing Stirling Macedonia at home. Olympic Kingsway are playing Sorrento, and Perth Red Stars are playing Perth Azzurri. So, for Bayswater City to make a return to Australia Championship and win the NPL West Australia title, they will need to win against Sterling Macedonia and hope Olympic Kingsways lose or draws, and Perth Red Star does the same. So a negative result for Perth Red Star and Olympic Kingsway and a positive one for Bayswater City will mean that the championship is theirs. However, if all three sides win this weekend, then it will go down to the final day in where Perth Red Star are facing Armidale, Bayswater City are playing Perth Glory, and Olympic Kingsway are playing Fremantle City. Now, we posted this last week on our Instagram. We did a prediction / percentage chance of winning, and our prediction model gave Bayswater City a 60% chance of qualifying, Olympic Kingsway 30%, and Perth Red Star 10%. So still all teams have a opportunity to qualify for the Australia Championship, though, especially after Bayswater won that game in hand. They are sitting in pole position and would need to slip against Sterling Macedonia or Perth Glory for the other teams to make a jump ahead of them. Now, Sterling Macedonia or Sterling Lions, they're currently in 6th, so still not an easy assignment, but Perth Glory on the final day is down in 10th. So it is in Bayswater's hands. Olympic Kingsway do have a tougher task with Sorrento in 8th, but then on the final day, Fremantle City in 4th. So we'll keep an eye on that one. It could happen this weekend. Bayswater takes on Sterling Macedonia this Friday at 9 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, so it'd be 6 o'clock on the West Coast. Perth Red Star are playing on Saturday, and Olympic Kingsway are also on the Saturday as well. So Bayswater will start the weekend off. If they win, then Perth Red Star and Olympic Kingsway knows what they need to do. However, if Bayswater slip to Sterling Lions, then the door opens for a Red Star or an Olympic Kingsway to make that jump ahead of the final round. The second last league we're going to look at in terms of who can qualify, it's the nation's capital, the ACT NPL competition. It's Canberra Croatia versus Monero Panthers. I learned recently that I've been saying this wrong the whole time, apparently. I was saying Monero, but it's apparently Monero. So apologies if you've been listening and screaming at my pronunciations of that for a while. So 3 points separate Canberra and the Panthers. 2 games left. However, this weekend it is the ultimate showdown. It's the biggest rivalry in NPL ACT. Canberra Croatia versus Monero Panthers will take place this coming Saturday at 5:45 at the home of the Panthers. So what needs to happen? Canberra Croatia can qualify this weekend. If Canberra Croatia wins away at the Panthers, they will win the premiership and advance to the Australia Championship. If the Panthers are able to knock off Canberra Croatia and pick up all 3 points, not only will they go level on points with Canberra, they will jump Canberra on the table because they have a goal difference of 41 compared to Canberra's 35. So if they draw, it stays the same, and then we go down to a final day showdown in where Canberra are playing Belconnen and Panthers are playing the Canberra White Eagles. So, again, we did the prediction or the percentage model, and the model actually gave the Panthers the higher percentage in this race because they are at home this weekend, because Canberra has to go to them. If I was Canberra, you'd be looking, you always want to play for the win. However, if you take the draw and go to the final day, you're back at home. That Monero has to go away from home. So, at the moment, it is Panthers who will be favouring their chances coming this weekend. But if the Panthers don't capitalise this weekend with the golden opportunity they have to not only go level but also take the lead on goal difference, then I feel it will slip back in favour of the Canberra Croatia and looking for a return to the national stage. Made it last year. Could we see a new side in Panthers qualify this year? Again, that one's at 5:45 on the Saturday. So again, stay tuned to our Instagram. You'll see the result of that and whether we'll be posting a Canberra Croatia qualifying for the Australia Championship or the Panthers winning and sending this into another blockbuster final day. So a lot of action, as you can see, and a lot of scenarios at play. We'll post all these scenarios tomorrow on Thursday if you're listening to this on the Wednesday. We'll place all the different equations and what needs to happen for this team to qualify and that team to qualify. So don't worry, we will have this all down in a visual format as well. But if you're listening to this on the podcast, you get it from a verbal and more in-depth scenario. Now, the final league is NPL New South Wales. Now, this is the most open still. There is still 3 games left, and there's still a lot to play for at the moment. So, at the moment, the Sutherland Sharks are in pole position. They're on 43 points. Now, their rivals, Rockdale Illidan, has dropped off the pace. They're on 37 points at the moment. And their new competitors are Manly United and SD Raiders. SD Raiders, who famously knocked out MacArthur FC in the Australia Cup last night on penalties. Fantastic game to watch. If you missed out on that one, I highly recommend watching the highlights. But those are the 2 teams chasing. Now, they are still 5 points off the Sutherland Sharks in 4th. Now, it is a 1-2-3 of Apia, Sydney United and Marconi. So therefore, the Australia Championship spot drops down to the highest non-foundation team, and that's currently the Sutherland Sharks. So 3 games remain, 5 points clear. To qualify this weekend, the Sutherland Sharks will need to go to the Palace at Marconi Stadium and defeat the Marconi Stallions. Now, the Marconi Stallions are on a massive slide. They've lost their last 4 games in a row. They were sitting pretty at the top of NPL New South Wales, dropped all the way down, and now they're 6 points behind Apia Leichhardt with 3 games remaining. So, absolute crumbling of Marconi over the last few weeks. So, could the Sutherland Sharks take advantage of that? Possibly, but Marconi could also come around and disrupt the Sutherland Sharks pattern as well. So, for them to qualify, they will need to beat Marconi at Marconi. They will also then require Manly United to lose to NWS Spirit, SD Raiders to lose to Apia, Rockdale Illidan failing to beat the Wollongong Wolves. What that would happen is Sutherland would go up to 46 points, which is 8 points clear of Manly United and SD Raiders, and that would mean they were unable to catch them with 2 games remaining, and Sutherland would be in the championship. Now, this is the reason why I left this to last is because there are a lot more moving parts into this one. It's not a straight shootout like we've talked about with some of the other leagues. It is a lot of moving parts, and still one that could really change drastically, especially like you look at SD Raiders, 4 wins out of 4 in their last 4. So they're climbing up. Manly undefeated in the last 5. But the issue is SD play Apia, Manly play Spirit. Yes, they, on form and paper, they could absolutely pull up an upset, but you still have to think Sutherland has it in their hands. Maybe not this weekend for the Sharks, but it could be in just a matter of time. So if we look ahead to what is to come, so say 5 points clear, say all 3 sides either win their games or lose their games, they all stay 5 points separate. Looking towards next week, SD have to go away to NWS Spirit. Sutherland Sharks host St. George at home, and Manly United have to go away to UNSW. So I'm predicting Sutherland will get it done not this weekend. I think Marconi will pick it up and get some sort of result, though I thought they were for sure going to get a result against St. George City, and they didn't, and then they were dismantled by Manly. So I don't know what's happening at Marconi at the moment, but I don't think for Sutherland to win that can happen, but for SD to lose, Manly to lose, and Rockdale all to lose as well, I don't know if that's going to happen as well. I think you might get 1 or 2 of those happening, but not all 3. So you look towards next week, Sutherland at home against St. George City. St. George City are safe from relegation. They've won their last 3. They're up to 34 points. So they will be comfortable. They will be possibly eyeing a finals position with that middle of the table of the NPL New South Wales, all very close. However, I think Sutherland at home get the job done and will qualify for the Australia Championship next weekend. I think the Manleys and the SDs have left their push a little bit too late to try and get up above Sutherland, and Rockdale, 1 win out of their last 5 have just fallen off the pace. and really gave Sutherland that breathing room with 3 games to go, and will look comfortably in securing their spot in the Australia Championship. Not this week, I don't think, but in the following weeks to come. So that is all the situations at play coming this weekend in the NPL. Everywhere around Australia, there is some sort of action that is, at play with the Australia Championship as well, and especially with the rise and the noise around NPL. We're about to go into the Australia Cup results. I think this is a fantastic time to promote the NPLs, what is happening and what this means in terms of a promotion to the Australia Championship. So again, you'll see all of this in kind of visual formats on the Instagram, so check out that. You'll see our Race to the Championship update. That one would have gone live already by the time you're listening to this. We're posting this in a couple hours my time, so it's midday now on Wednesday. So you'll see all the tables and who's to play what, so you'll get to see a visual thing, and then tomorrow on the Thursday you'll see what needs to happen for each team to qualify for the Australia Championship this weekend. Now, we'll head to Australia Cup results, and the round 16 has started, and there's been fantastic news. And if you're an NPL fan, and if you're an Australia Championship fan, or fans of these clubs, or just a fan of football in general. So it started on Saturday, and where the Wanderers were knocked out by Melbourne Victory, and then you look to the Sunday, and South Melbourne, who would have fancied their chance against Fremantle City comfortably. They went 2-0 up, two in a matter of minutes. They were looking very comfortable. Fremantle hit them back for 2, then got a third, and then South Melbourne were chasing the game. South Melbourne equalised 3-3, and then went all the way to penalties, where South Melbourne finally advanced to the quarterfinals 3-1 on penalties. Very roller coaster of a game, like I said. You would have thought South Melbourne 2-0 up at home, rainy, horrible conditions, would see the job out, but they just let Fremantle in more and more, and then next thing you know, it's all the way to penalties where it's 50-50, but South Melbourne were able to advance there and, keep the prospect of a South Melbourne Preston quarterfinal on the cards. Now, Preston will have to do their job tonight. We'll talk about that in a second. But, it's good for South Melbourne. They advance. So then we go to last night on the Tuesday. We already talked about Steve knocking off MacArthur on penalties. But the other fixture was Lions FC, the newly promoted side to the Australia Championship, knocked off a very young and very poor Melbourne City 2-0. A horror moment for the goalkeeper in Melbourne City. If you haven't checked that out, go to the Australia Cup socials or YouTube for the highlights. It's a horrific own goal from the goalkeeper. But 2-0 victors from Lions FC, and that now means if you look at the right-hand side of the Australia Cup draw, there are no A-League sides left remaining, and therefore we will see another NPL member club, however you want to say it, in the final of the Australia Cup. And in the quarterfinals, there will only be 2 A-League sides competing in that, and that's Sydney FC, who have to travel to SD Raiders, and Melbourne Victory, who await the winner of Apia and City 958. So the NPL is rising. People keep saying that the gap between NPL and A-League is closing. Some people are saying that is shut, like they're on par. I just think it's a fantastic thing for our game. The conversation of, the NPL clubs is growing, momentum is growing, and I really think that this could be the year we see an NPL side lift the Australia Cup for the first time in modern history. Now, a lot of these clubs lifted it back in the NSL eras, but to do it in the modern history for the first time, I think will be a fantastic achievement, not only for the NPL clubs, but the NPL as a whole, and what that means for the broader Australian footballing community and discussions that need to happen, not just on a podcast, but I think at a higher level of Australian football and Australian football governance. So that's the results so far of the round 16. Looking ahead to tonight, so this podcast coming out at 6. These games are kicking off at 7:30 and 7:45. You have Heidelberg United, who was Australia Championship semi-finalist and Australia Cup finalist last year. They're taking on North Sunshine Eagles at 7:45. And then you also have Preston Lions taking on Brunswick Juventus. And as I said, the winner will host South Melbourne. And it's possibly Preston versus South Melbourne, big show edition in the Australia Cup, which would be, light years ahead of any NPL game we have seen, especially with the rise of Preston over the last few weeks. It'll be a much bigger occasion between the two clubs. And then also tonight, the big one on Paramount Plus, it's a Sydney derby between Appia Leichhardt and Sydney United 58 at Leichhardt Oval. Now, when the draw happened, was I super excited about this fixture? Not really, because it is the fifth time in the space of 12 months these two sides are versing each other. Appia Leichhardt have defeated Sydney United 3 of those occasions, 2 coming in the Australia Championship, 1 in the NPL New South Wales. Though Sydney United would argue that their win, only one, is arguably bigger than those 3 wins put together, and that was the win in the Waratah Cup final in just, I think, over a month ago now, or a month and a bit ago. So that was a big result for Sydney United 58 there. Can they reproduce a result like that tonight and come away from Leichhardt Oval with the win? Or will Appia Leichhardt return to the quarterfinals for the first time in many years? I think it's going to be a very fascinating one. Both sides are first and second in NPL New South Wales. Both are on pretty good run of form at the moment. Sydney United 1 loss in their last 5. Appia Leichhardt 4 wins out of their last 5. So both are in top-notch form. Sydney United have been building back into that title race. So a big night in Australia Cup tonight between Appia Leichhardt and Sydney United. The winner will play Melbourne Victory at home. So they'll be licking their lips at that. And then from there, you're only 1 game away from a semi-final and then another one away from a final against another NPL side. So both sides will fancy their chances, especially Melbourne having to come up to them in the quarterfinals and then facing either an SD Rays or a Sydney FC at home, or in Sydney at least, no travelling required. So it's going to be a fantastic night at Leichhardt Oval. I will be there reporting on it. So stay tuned to that one. And yes, I think that's 7:30 Paramount Plus, if you're wanting to watch that Sydney derby. So that's all the footballing action and results and fixtures we have to update you on. Next is going to be kind of the off-the-field topics that have been circling around the Australia Championship clubs over the last few weeks. First off, we start with some older news and the announcement that Peter Sakanis, the head coach of the Marconi Stands, will be leaving at the end of the Australia Championship. We don't know exactly what or where he's going to. There's been some rumours about him going to Appia Leichhardt as a technical director, so not in a coaching role, but as a technical director. That's been a rumour that I've seen swirled around, but nothing concrete, and then nothing concrete in the way of who will be replacing him. So that is some big news out of Marconi, a big change there. Sakanis has been there for many, many years, has led them to NPL New South Wales Championships, the Australia Championship final last year. So a huge shake-up coming to the Palace at Marconi. The other news as well, and this one we talked about briefly at the start of the episode, 24 to 48 hours old now, but South Melbourne has signalled their A-League intention once again. This comes off the back of Western United being officially rejected by the APL in terms of their return to the A-League. They were supposed to return to the A-League for this coming season, put into hibernation, but on Monday, the APL pulled the plug on the Western United venture, so they will not be returning to the A-League in any capacity. And less than 24 hours later, South Melbourne released a media statement that says that they wish to signal their intention to open formal dialogue with the Australian professional leagues and relevant stakeholders regarding the prospect of securing future A-League men's and A-League women's licenses. So once again, we're here to talk about South Melbourne trying to get into the A-League. I think the general consensus that I've seen online as well is that, people are like, there's not a whole lot of negatives that they can bring up regarding this. I I'm always going to be a big advocate of these clubs getting their shot on the A-League, and I think it is time, because you look at what South Melbourne, yes, on the field have done, Australia Championship winners, obviously Pro League, NPL Victoria commitments, all that sort of stuff. I think off the field they have done a lot of work in securing finances, stability, making them a professionally run club in the NPL Victoria. And I think now, if ever, I think some people said like the APL needs them more than South needs them. So I hope this is the start of the dialogue. And I said to someone last night, look, West United, no one, like, there was a very small minority that said they were a fantastic addition to the league and what they brought and stuff. I didn't think they brought much to the league during their time. Yes, they won the A-League. However, I think realistically, if their biggest achievement or biggest impact of Australian football is to demonstrate, trying to start up new clubs in already established markets like a Melbourne, like a Sydney, doesn't work, and you don't lean into the clubs that are already there with the history, with the heritage, with the fan bases, then, and get South Melbourne into the A-League, then I think that will be, a hard lesson learned by the APL. But if it leads to a South Melbourne opening that door to other NPL clubs, possibly getting back into the top flight of Australian football, then I'd say it'd be worth it. So we'll see how that one plays. Now, they won't be in for this season of the A-League, so it'll be the 2027-28 season that they would be joining it if the APL, gives them the key, gives them the license to do so. And that's the same year that I believe Canberra United are looking to join the league as well. So you could possibly have a 14-team A-League season come next year. And, I think with all the talk of how good the NPL clubs are doing, all the cup sets in this year's Australia Cup, the need for promotion relegation, the A-League dropping, NPL standards rising, I think, it's time that the government's level starts looking at these results and, actually talking about what they can do. Because, everyone talks about the ceiling that football has in this country, and we're just not utilizing it at the moment. Some people say, yes, promotion relegation will never work, blah, blah, blah. But I think if there is a clear outline from Football Australia going, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and this is why we think it's going to work. I think if they outline that, then I think there will be this turn in terms of, okay, we can actually do this. There'll be some clubs that are wanting to do this. I think, even the Australia Championship, yes, last year, it was a Champions League format, but I think it just demonstrated that, okay, we can actually do this. This can work. Is there room for improvement? Of course. But again, it shows that we can do this, and there is a possibility to do this on a full-time scales. So, again, the only thing I disagree with South Melbourne in terms of their media statement that they released yesterday is that they wanted to maintain its presence in the OFC Pro League, the Australia Championship, and the NPL Victoria, whilst exploring the opportunity to add A-League men's and A-League women's team to its future, to its football structure. I would say if South Melbourne do go up into the A-League, they will have to relinquish their position in the Australia Championship. Again, it's just kind of, for me, football traditionally, you can't be playing in the first tier and the second tier. You got to be in one or the other. Obviously, Pro League, that's a different confederation, different rules. So if they want to keep doing that, then fantastic. They can keep doing that. Auckland do it in the A-League anyway, so they can still do that. NPL Victoria, all the A-League clubs have their junior sides in the NPL anyway, so again, they can do that. I just think with the Australia Championship, if they go up into the A-League, then you can't play in both tiers. You got to be in one or the other. So that's the news about South Melbourne, and they're wanting to return to the A-League. And then the final piece of news that we have to talk about is Preston Lions. Congratulations to them. They defeated Heidelberg in the Dockley Cup final 3-1 last weekend to secure their first Dockley Cup title in over 34 years. It was a really good game from what I saw. 2-1, and then the third goal came in the last minute and cued the celebrations. So a really strong showing from Preston, and again, it just shows that they are building in the right direction. They were VPL 1 two seasons ago, and now they've been in the NPL last year. They're looking to make finals this year, and then Doherty Cup winners this year. So I would fancy them to do well come the Australia Championship as well. So we'll see how that goes, but they are also a massive club that are building and taking the steps in the right direction as well. So that will wrap up our episode for this week. A lot of me yapping, a lot of football news to talk about, a lot of scenarios at play coming this weekend. But again, at this time of year, it is nearly full steam to the Australia Championship. We're not quite there yet. NPL is still the priority for all the clubs, and especially with those chasing qualifications, they need to secure what they need to do. However, it is fun for us fans, journalists, reporters to look at what needs to happen, the scenarios at play, and everything that is involved with that. So we'll be back this time next week, Wednesday, 6 p.m., hopefully with a special guest. Hopefully we'll get some of the clubs that qualify from this weekend onto the show to talk about their journey, the final days, or how stressful it was looking at the table and stuff like that. So hopefully we'll get some of that. If you want a specific club, let me know. Follow on the Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff to keep up to date. Share it around with friends, family, anyone you think would be interested in football, especially with, all the talk of NPL clubs. That's all we talk about on here. So yeah, just spread the word, and I'd love the conversation to grow more and more from you guys. So thank you very much for listening. I will be back, like I said, next week. So enjoy the Australia Cup action tonight. Enjoy all the NPL action over the weekend. Stay tuned on the Instagram to see which clubs, if any, qualify for the Australia Championship this weekend. And we'll be back to Unbreak It All next week. So until then, thank you for listening, and I'll see you then. Bye.